Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Joe, for the invitation to be here this evening. Well, certainly Michael McDougall and myself know the volatility of Dublin South East, and Dermot Lacey over there knows it as well, and thank you for that welcome, Michael, and for that introduction, Noel. Obviously, we've heard, as you can see, very wide-ranging views this evening on just where we need to go in relation to the kind of reform that we have all been talking about, hearing in our media. What direction do we need to go with our Gardaí, with the changes, the structural changes? What are the challenges? I think they've got a really good airing so far tonight, and I want to add to that and make some points that I think are particularly relevant in the context of this debate. And I want to say how much I welcome the debate here tonight. It's really important. This is the debate that we need to have going forward, because this is, as has been said by a number of speakers, such an important part of our democracy, essential to our democracy, that we get this challenge right. And we do talk a lot about reform these days. And it isn't reform, obviously, simply for the sake of reform. It is reform to keep pace with the rapidly changing realities of life in contemporary Ireland. I think we all accept that. And I suppose I would say to Dermot, I think reform can be incremental, very often is incremental, but you do need those big vision pieces as well. And I would argue that some of the initiatives we're taking at the moment are about those big vision pieces, and that they're a very important part of the jigsaw towards moving to the kind of systems that we need in this area, and that there are real opportunities. Crime trends are changing, just as social behaviours and technologies change. What makes us feel unsafe or vulnerable may not be the same as before. All we have to do is look at online threats that our children can face. Great opportunity there, but threats as well, and indeed adults. That's part of the changing experience for people of crime. Our society is becoming more litigious. That's very clear when you examine the figures that the Supreme Court, for example, are dealing with at present. More lay citizens are accessing the courts. Very interesting to see the kind of changes there that our judges and our lawyers speak about. You see it not just, of course, as Dermot has said, not just in Ireland, but internationally. The concept of justice may in many ways be fixed and of the ages, but our conceptualisation of how justice works and applies itself does evolve, no question of that, as we have a more empowered community, a more empowered citizenship. We expect more. We expect to be more involved. We expect more participation. We see that in the justice systems and in the institutions as they evolve as well. And some would argue that for some institutions in our society, there has been little evolution. You can have state concepts of a court. There are changes needed. We saw that during the debate on the children's referendum, for example, about the role of children in the courts and how they're involved and engaged and how they participate. And, you know, the courts are struggling to figure out how do we listen to the voices of children and young people. Very interesting to see the research that's been done in that area and how that concept is developing. We see lingering Victorian concepts of penal institutions, although we know we're coming to terms with that, with the huge programme of prison reform that is actually in place and has happened over the last number of years. Real changes. You see the figures today, 500 less people in our prisons than there were a couple of years ago, 4 years ago I think it is. And that's because we're changing our views in the courts and in our laws. And Dermot may criticise the development of those laws, but you see, because of the way we're dealing with fines, for example, now, you've less people in our prisons. To take one example where a law that was really necessary has come in and is beginning to impact. So much change in the air, and I would say that as a government we are committed to justice reform, and that's important as a statement. And, I am charged now, somewhat unexpectedly, as has been said, with leading this reform, advised by a new Cabinet Committee on justice reform, which we've never had before, which I think is interesting in itself and says something about the approach of government to justice, and perhaps a culture that was more secretive, and even, if you like, secretive to the degree that there was not subcommittees of Cabinet, and they have involved, as we know, in other areas as well. But I think that's an interesting point as well about the evolution. Last week, for example, the Oireachtas passed the bill to establish the new Court of Appeal, actioning the decision of the people, paving the way for more efficient hearing of appeals and tackling that backlog in the Supreme Court. And we know the old phrase, justice delayed is justice denied, and we certainly see that. And in order to deal with that, you can see that the Court of Appeal is justice reform in action, because it will make a difference and is in line with best international practice to make sure that people can have their cases heard more quickly. We are seeing the rollout of community return. We're seeing other supervised forms of community sanctions. I know this well from my time as Minister for Children, what the changes that we've seen in relation to juvenile justice. I'll give you some figures in a moment in relation to that. But justice reform must apply to policing. That's very clear. The question of how you do it is the one that's up for discussion here tonight. And as I say, you've heard very different views on that. And reform can be as exciting as it is challenging. When it comes to reforming an economy, I believe, or a health system, or a police service, you do need to be very careful that you don't confuse brutal assault with corrective action. And as the great philosopher, politician Edmund Burke might have warned, you do not want to destroy the totality in the attempt to fix individual elements. I think that's very important to remember that as we talk about reform in this area. And I think that's the situation that we're in when it comes to Garda Síochána. We have a national body. Many would agree that there is a proven and proud track record in many areas, but very complex, constantly evolving. The complexity very recently illustrated. If you, for example, take the Limerick cases just decided in court last week, if you take some of the other issues we've been struggling with in recent weeks and hearing about, the huge complexity is emerging. And I do want to stress, and I think it's worth saying this, that when you criticise the structure or culture within the Guards, as I do, and I will this evening, that you're not attacking the force in its entirety. You're not. You do value, and you have to look at the contribution that is made, that its members have made to Irish life. You do have to look at the contribution in keeping our community safe. Every one of us know that. The contribution, and never forget this, to preserving the security of the state against enormous attack. I went to a memorial service for the Gardaí recently. 87, I think, is the figure of Gardaí who've died preserving that security in a whole variety of ways. I think that's a context that we do have to remember as well. When you look at the Garda report that I put before the Dáil this week, and you go down all of the statistics, useful reminders there of the challenges they face. 260 organised crime gangs were targeted. 157 grow houses detected, 21,000 referrals made on juvenile justice. So very complex tasks undertaken by the men and women and the leadership of Garda Síochána. I could go on, but that does not permit us to ignore pockets of misconduct or cover-up, or poor practice or bad management when it comes to penalty points, when it comes to crime investigation, when it comes to whistleblowers. And I do believe that in some cases, what we have learned about the behaviour of Garda Síochána has struck at the heart of our shared understanding of what justice itself is. We live in a republic with laws, where there is not and there cannot be a situation of one law for some but not for others. We live in a republic where all citizens are and should be treated equally. That's what we expect, and I think more importantly, it's what we are entitled to expect. And when we discover that is not being delivered, we do not take it lying down. That's very clear from the reactions to the various reports we've been discussing recently. And I do believe that failure affronts us as individuals. I believe it affronts politicians as well when we see what we have, what has been uncovered in recent times. And failure has in recent times led to public controversy on a number of fronts in relation to Gardaí. And I have to say, as Minister for Justice, I do want to see confidence trumping controversy. No question about that. We do have to restore confidence. And I do want to see confidence restored in the work of An Garda Síochána. I do want to see the men and women fully supported in doing their job. And I do want to see a sea change in the performance, administration and oversight of justice and policing in this state. And I think it's right to have that vision. Dermot talked about needing an investigation or another investigation, and Noel did reference the heart attack that somebody was having down in the audience in relation to that. I think it was Morris. But, is that the way to go? Or can we do it by having the vision right now as a government to deliver what is clearly on the agenda that people want to see being delivered? So we have initiated that programme of reform, and we are bringing forward proposals to establish an independent Garda authority. And the questions that Michael McDowell has raised here tonight are relevant questions. It is complex. I hosted an information seminar with all of the stakeholders in Farmley, and the very questions that have been put here tonight were on the agenda at that seminar. There are serious questions about the security issues and how they are managed in the context of establishing a Garda authority. There are serious questions about how do you get the expertise that you need in the new Garda authority. Who should the members be? Some people would argue for a representative body. Should it be expertise? Should it be representative? These are all the very serious questions that we are working on at present. And the detail is not out there for the very simple reason that those are the issues that we are examining. This is the reason the Justice Committee went and examined models in the north of Ireland and in the UK, and why we're looking at international best practice. I think there is an argument, given our changing democracy, that you have more democratic accountability in relation to the Gardaí. Of course there is. And I do believe that an important part of that democratic accountability can lie with a Garda authority. But it does not mean that politicians are not also accountable for aspects, obviously, of our justice system. It does not mean that accountability in the Dáil goes away, but these issues of the precise relationship between the Minister for Justice, a new Garda authority and the Dáil are very real ones as we develop the Irish model, because we cannot develop a model that's appropriate for another country. We have to develop our own model, and that's what we intend to do. We're also, as you know, having an international open campaign to recruit a new Garda Commissioner. We are reforming GSOC. The heads of that bill have been published, and the full bill will be published this week. That gives more strength to an oversight body, which is absolutely essential as well. They are about a new architecture of openness and accountability in the administration and oversight of policing, and that is right, as I've said, in a modern-day democracy. But I do want to make a point as well, and I'll make it briefly. We talk quite a lot, and in the 2005 Act, we did see some excellent big-ticket reforms. The new Ombudsman Commission, GSOC, the new Garda Inspector. Similarly, that 2005 Act did follow the loss of confidence in relation to the Morris Tribunal that had emerged, and they investigated the very serious issues of misconduct in that. But you could argue that perhaps an opportunity was missed to look at more root and branch issues of basic policing which arose in Morris. Now, I want to make it clear, I'm not criticising the Act or those who framed it, who are here. That would be too easy, because you know the old saying about hindsight giving you 20/20 vision. And as I stated, there were some excellent reforms in 2005. But we do need more comprehensive solutions, and I'll make this point. If you look at the Guerin report, much of the commentary was about whistleblowers. Are they important? Yes. Are they urgent? Absolutely. But is that enough? The answer is no. When you read the Guerin report, it's very interesting to read the findings in that report as they relate to very fundamental issues of how probationary Gardaí are supported and supervised, about how Garda districts are managed and organised. And I think that justice reform requires much more comprehensive and sustained corrective action than what has happened very often. We do have to move beyond some of those big-ticket items and really look at the all-pervasive change that is needed, that's complex and deep-rooted. Yes, we need the oversight. Yes, we need the management and the role of whistleblowers. All of that has to be worked on. But the more subtle ones, the changes affecting all systems and the behaviour affecting everyone, including everything from local administration to internal communication, performance standards and how we monitor those in the Gardaí, to crime prevention, from culture to human resource management. These are the very many bread and butter issues which come into play every day in every Garda district and every Garda unit. And while I would be the first to welcome many of the innovations implemented by Gardaí, I can't be blind to the reality, nor can any of us, that in some areas the structures and culture have changed little. And so we have to move beyond that. We have to foster a culture which supports the effective working of all Gardaí. We do have to craft a policing service that's fit for the 21st century. And I do, as Minister, have to stand back to a certain degree from that. I do not have to get involved in all of the details by direct intervention. But I do have to lay down the non-negotiables, the standards, the direction, the absolute requirements of An Garda Síochána. And I think the wrong thing for a Minister for Justice to do would be to make the decisions that Garda management should be made, which should be informed by the input of every member of the force within the force. And I totally agree with the points that have been made, for example, about the human rights audit. I believe in the points that have been made about training and education. These are very critical issues that have to be addressed just as much as those big-ticket items which I have spoken about. And, of course, the input and the expectation of the public, of all of you, the citizens, and what you want to see, a forum has to be found for that as well. So questions like, is the configuration of how we deliver police services right? Is the collection, analysis and presentation of crime statistics, is it robust and reliable? Is there a need for a new standards-led inspection approach to policing practice? We do it in, for example, we're increasingly doing it in the whole child protection area, where we're going into teams, looking at what's happening, reporting objectively on the actual practice, holding the practice to account to a standard. Again, I've asked the question already, are there sufficient supports in place to support trainee and probationary Gardaí? Underneath every one of those questions, and I would impertinently suggest, underlying every one of the questions that you might raise this evening, is the broader question of how to make policing a proud and respected profession in the 21st century Ireland, how to make it a lifelong career, while at the same time preventing the accretion of unexamined habits, because it is those unexamined habits that, like the barnacles on the underside of a boat, inhibit progress. It is the development of those unexamined habits that add up to a damaged and damaging culture. In the next few weeks, I will be receiving more reports from the Garda Inspectorate on the investigation of serious crime by the Gardaí. I'll also be getting another report, a review of the force from the Haddington Road Agreement, another review that's being done. And I think that those reports will also provide a foundation from which we can identify and drive reforms in basic policing, answering some of the questions that I have posed, and addressing the habits and culture in a deliberative, constructive, and what I hope will be a transforming manner. I do believe we can get those big-ticket items right. It's not easy. You've heard the complexity here tonight with respect to establishing the new authority and the opening up of the appointment of the Garda Commissioner. I believe that the government can and will demand that the Garda Síochána at every level challenges its own culture and faces up to its own unexamined habits. And that applies, by the way, to many organisations and can apply to lots of different areas that we all work in. But they do need to be stripped away and examined. And the end result is to ensure that people have a quality and effective police service which they can be proud of, so that the proud contribution that the men and women of An Garda Síochána can make through their everyday policing will stand recognised, and will stand recognised as that critical part of our democracy that has been spoken about here tonight. And the reason we would do that is so that justice can be served for one and all, always. Thank you very much indeed.